Is Tom Tugendhat, Conservative MP and former Security Minister. Finally got you on, Tom. Thank you for joining us on the show.
Julia, I'm sorry I was late. The security lines getting into conference were a lot longer than I expected.
As a former security minister,
fault, and I do apologise.
We will. I'm sure my audience will accept this. Look, I want to just ask you just briefly before I want to talk to you about the China spy case, but I want to talk to you briefly just first of all about the police getting greater powers to ban repeat protests after what we saw a huge number of different demos and protests in that big march on Saturday as well. They call themselves pro-Palestinian. I don't think that is what the march is about. What do you think of those powers? Do we need them?
Well, look, I think, frankly, we need to see the police taking the decision to stop incitement to racial hatred being actioned on our streets as under the cover of marching in favour of one cause or another. I mean, I raised this at the time. I think this is something that we've really got to look at. And I wrote, actually, funnily enough, for Jewish News on Sunday about this, saying what the police are doing is they're making a political decision. The decision they're making is that it is better to have a quiet march today and tolerate radicalization over months and years to come. Well, I don't agree with that decision. That's a political decision. It's not a tactical one. It's not a policing decision. I don't agree with that decision, and so I don't think this is where operational independence of the policing should lie.
Well, and that's the issue, isn't it? I've just been reading out, all the list of terror attacks. It's not all of them in the last 20 years, but it's most of them. Islamist terrorists, largely either themselves born abroad, mostly though their parents born abroad and brought here. We have a problem in this country. Now we've got the Phoebes and Tristrams going on these marches, doing every left-wing cause, but we've also got an awful lot of people in this country who are properly radicalised, a huge number. I mean, I think it's only a quarter. Was it Henry Jackson Society found last year? Only a quarter of Muslims in this country believe that people were raped and murdered on October the 7th. Whole thing's completely made up. I mean, the evidence is blatantly obvious. Huge number of non-Muslims in this country also believe that, terrifyingly as well. We have a problem. What is the problem, and how do we deal with it?
Well, I think we've got a range of issues, actually, and one of them is that there are actually many, many Muslim families in this country who are absolutely terrified of the radicalisation that they see on the streets, because they know that it speaks directly to their kids, and they're keeping their kids safe like you and I do, keeping them away from sort of, horrible influences on the internet or whatever. They're keeping them in nice mosques, nice churches, whatever it happens to be. They're looking after their kids properly, and suddenly all of these sort of vile graffitis, the parachutists, the slogans, all that sort of stuff goes straight into their home through the TV set. And worse than that, it's happening in front of the police and the police do nothing. So this leads many Muslim families who spoke to me in recent years to think that, frankly, the police isn't on their side. Now, this is a problem because, frankly, if we leave the ground to the extremists, then it's the honourable, the decent, the law-abiding who get silenced and get cut out, and that's simply unacceptable. But I'm afraid there's a real problem here as well. We have seen the Muslim Brotherhood spread its wings across the United Kingdom in ways that it has not been allowed to in the United Arab Emirates, in Saudi Arabia, in Jordan, in Egypt, and I can keep going. Now, the problem is the Muslim Brotherhood isn't something you can prescribe. It's not an organisation. It's not like Hamas or Hezbollah.
Well, Hamas is basically a Muslim Brotherhood organisation, though, isn't it?
It is, no, exactly. But Muslim, if you want to think of it, the Muslim Brotherhood is like communism. Hamas is like the Communist Party of Great Britain. Do you see what I mean? It's one is an ideology, the other is an organisation. And the Muslim Brotherhood ideology is a huge problem, and it's one that we have to combat. But we have to combat it by getting the Charity Commission the powers that it properly should be using. We need to have organisations like Hamas, but actually there are many others that have a much better reputation than Hamas. I mean, that's not really very hard, is it? But, that seem to be law-abiding who are sharing this ideology. Now, we wouldn't tolerate fascist ideology. We wouldn't tolerate that kind of hateful ideology. Frankly, we shouldn't tolerate the hammer or sickle either, but that's another matter. But, the reality is we shouldn't be tolerating extremism. We should be calling it out. And even when it's not illegal, even if it's freedom of speech, we should know who's using it, who's saying it, and we should be able to judge them accordingly, even if it's only personally.
Should the people who are not British citizens, whether they've come here with indefinite leave to remain or whatever basis, if they express any of those views, those thought, we don't want thought crimes, but if they express those views, should we deport them? I mean, should we just say we don't want people in this country who have been radicalised, who believe that, that Jews are animals and things like, as a hate preacher who apparently was followed by the Manchester synagogue killer Jihad al-Shami?
Well, you know what you remind me of, Julia? There was a story, I'm going to get the year wrong, so forgive me, but there was a story a few years ago in the French newspapers about a prefect, so sort of the leader of a French department, who was doing the sort of citizenship ceremony for new French citizens, and a veiled woman refused to shake his hand. Well, guess what he did? He refused to hand over the passport and denied her citizenship instantly. It went all the way to the Supreme Court, and you would imagine that the Supreme Court in the UK might do one thing. Well, I can tell you what the Supreme Court in France did. They said that she failed on with not having Republican values, and she was not allowed to be granted citizenship, and that was that. Frankly, if you want to be part of this country, and I think it's a wonderful country, I think it's amazingly tolerant, and by the way, I happen to think it's the greatest country to be of any religion, and talk to Sajid Javid, talk to any number of different people about this. It is a fantastic country. In fact, Shabana Mahmood said it's the greatest country to be a Muslim in. So, this is a fantastic country, but you know what? You need to play your part.
Absolutely. Can I talk to you about this Chinese spy trial? I'd be grateful actually if you could explain to audience, because it's utterly bizarre. Two men charged with alleged spying in Parliament on behalf of China, and the trial has collapsed, as far as we can understand, because the government's official documents say that China isn't an enemy state. Now, you've got personal experience dealing with China. Explain to us what has actually happened and why the trial has collapsed.
So look, I've just got to be a little careful, Julia, because there's a lot of speculation around here, and quite rightly, people in our country are innocent unless proven guilty, and these two have not been proven guilty, so we have to treat them as they are. Now, they were charged under the Official Secrets Act 1911. Now, that requires you to help an enemy state, not just a foreign state, but an enemy state. Now, I didn't think that was good enough, and that's why when I was Security Minister, I introduced the new National Security Act 2023, but they weren't charged under that because they were arrested before it came into force. So, that required the government to prove that China is an enemy state. Now, I don't know what happened. All I can tell you is that when I was in office, there was no question that the government was going to give evidence saying that. Now, again, I say I don't know what happened, but the CPS, the Crown Prosecution Service, sent me and others a letter saying that the evidential threshold, I can't remember the exact wording of that bit, was, and I quote, no longer met. Now, if it's no longer met, it means it was met before, doesn't it? It means something has changed. Now, what has changed? I don't know. But frankly, the idea that anybody in government would balance our national security against whatever temporary benefit they think they might get out of Beijing, and let's face it, it would be very temporary anyway, is frankly extraordinary.
But this is it. There are papers that we kind of reported that basically they believe that Jonathan Powell, the Prime Minister's National Security Advisor, again used to be very senior advisor to Tony Blair when he's in power. All these they bring him back. They put the old band back together, haven't they? And that he advised that actually under the documents that China was not an enemy state, and therefore as a result of that this fell. But the argument seems to be that they are trying to, kowtow to the Chinese. We've still got this possibility of this massive Chinese embassy, right, near the Tower of London, near the city, that could go ahead, and that basically they're desperate to be nice to the Chinese and not upset them. This looks horribly like foreign influence over our courts, to me. I'm sorry, that's what it looks like to me.
Well, it doesn't look great, does it? And now, I can't tell you whether the story about Jonathan Powell is true or not. I'm afraid I don't know. All I can say is that story in the Sunday Times read very powerfully. And the other thing that is clear is that there's a bunch of people who simply don't understand what trade is. They all think, like socialists, that trade is some sort of gift that people give you. It's absolute rubbish. People trade with you because they're going to make money. Yep. That's the only reason they do it. The idea that it's some sort of a gift is complete rubbish. You shouldn't be banging down to people for trade. You should be looking for advantage, looking for opportunity, and doing business with the right people and not with the wrong ones. It's as simple as that. Absolutely.
Can I just ask you also finally about what's been going on at Tory Party conference? We've got an opening speech from Kemi Badenoch yesterday, and a lot of people talking about pressure on her. Of course, pressure on her taken off a little bit by the pressure on Keir Starmer at his. But we've had an announcement from Sir Mel Stride, the Shadow Chancellor, promising £23 billion in welfare savings, cutting the civil service numbers back to the 2016 levels. That would be a third cut. Also pledging to end business rates for pubs and shops, and indeed also saying foreign nationals won't be able to claim benefits. It's quite a raft of policies. A lot of people might go, oh, I agree with that, agree with that, agree with that. Why didn't you all do it when you were in power?
Well, look, Julia, I mean, we can write the history books if you like, but the truth is we've got to think about the future. The reality is we got messed up with a whole bunch of different things. You don't need me to tell you about that, Julia. You watched it too. And did we let the country down on that? Of course we did. We know that. We know that. We've got to plan for the future. And the truth is the future demands us to cut costs. Look, I mean, I wish it weren't so, Julia, but you know the truth as well as I do. We are spending like sailors on shore leave. We've now got the biggest welfare budget. We've now got the biggest national expenses that we've had in, well, ever actually, and we are racking up the debt. And the simple truth is we have now got taxes so high that our tax take is going to be falling over coming years. People are leaving to, you know, the United Arab Emirates, to Italy, to Portugal, to Australia, wherever it is. And those are the taxpayers. We are going to be in real trouble in a year or two because of the decisions that Labour has made and Rachel Reeves has made to tax us all more. And what that's going to do is leave an even bigger hole. You don't need me to tell you that. You know exactly what it is. We need to bring down the cost of spending. Tell you why. Because a country is like a family. If you spend too much, you end up in debt to outsiders.
Really good to get to speak to you, Tom Tugendhat, Conservative MP, former Security Minister. Thank you for that. And Claire Pistol, who's a former Conservative Government Advisor and grateful not to be at Party Conference. Very noisy it was too.
Yes.
What do you make of what you had to say, whichever you want to come back on?
I think the China spy situation is really, really interesting. And I'm just amazed that this is still going on, that the spying in this way, it's so old school. This could
well,
have been
again, I have to say alleged. We know that China is spying these two men. It's an alleged case. Yes.
It's something out of a John le Carré novel rather than sort of the cyber world that we live in. So I find that quite interesting. No longer meets the evidential threshold.
Yeah, again, well.